Is there such a thing as too much self-awareness? And I say that because I've noticed a lot of people that are interested in philosophy, whether it be me or you or a lot of people I've seen online, sometimes like thinking has helped them solve a lot of their life problems. But thinking is also the source of a lot of their life problems. And there's such a thing as overthinking, as we all know about. So have you ever felt you fall into a zone of overthinking, or do you struggle with that?
All the time, of course, right? My therapist tells me to think less because I'm always thinking about plan G and F and whatever, plan Z. And it's like, no, plan A worked out just fine. You're great. When I was at Lafayette, our math department was on the second floor of like the equivalent of Annenberg, and the third floor was philosophy and languages. And my math professors always make fun of me for going up to the third floor right after math for philosophy classes. And one of my favorite jokes came from one of my professors, my real analysis professor. And she said, right, like one day a philosopher ran down from the third floor, and I was like, wait, guys, like everybody in the math department, stop working. I just found this issue in math that fundamentally changes everything. Like nothing you do matters because this one issue in the foundation of mathematics. And then everybody ignored him, went back to work. 10 years later, the same guy runs back downstairs, like, oh, don't worry, guys, I figured it out. The problem is solved. You can keep going on doing your math. Everybody's like, great, we never paid attention to you in the first place, right? Like the philosopher will do that. And that does happen for many, many philosophers in the world, which is why I didn't end up going to get a PhD in philosophy because it's a little much, right? At some point, it became like, what's the point? Like, I get thinking and questioning, but at some point, it gets so esoteric and pointless that I don't see it as beneficial anymore, right? In a way, it becomes like a video game. You're always in your room on your chair thinking about things that doesn't really relate or matter to 99.9% of people in the world. I rather think more about the bigger issues and act on those issues than just sitting there and thinking. So yes, I think too much self-awareness will almost paralyze you into like inaction, right? You're always thinking, you're always questioning, and you're not doing anything about it. I can sit there and reason about why I should go to the gym and never walk into the gym. But at some point, I need to stop being so self-aware and just get my ass into the gym, right? So yeah,
And I think it goes to a broader question of not just deep thinkers, but everyone in general, how our mind has a tendency to think a lot about the past and the future and never living in the present.
yeah.
So, what are ways you found over the years that have helped you turn off your brain? And have you ever found anything that can help you turn off your brain for a little bit of time? Or, I mean, it's a challenge. So,
That's a great question. Meditation helps. I use Headspace. Teachers and students now get free Headspace. Y'all should get it. Um,
how do you provide it?
no, the app is just free. If you have like a school email address, they'll give you a subscription for free. And you have all kinds of meditations for different things, right? You can do it for anxiety, do it for like restlessness, do it for any sort of things. So I think meditation helps. It's literally about being in the present, following your breath, checking with your body, and not worrying about things going outside, right? For us in class, we do block trees, which is not right. It's not a direct translation, but the fundamental idea is that we're spending time to like pause and check in with our bodies and how we're doing in a day. And talking about it actually, research shows helps, right? Talking about how you're feeling helps you to be more aware, to be more mindful, to be more in line with your body. Um, just getting away from screens, going back to the idea of screens. I think getting away from your devices helps. Going for a walk, right? Like I realize that sometimes, like last year when I walk with Toby, my brain is thinking about work. I'm like, okay, when I get back home after this walk, I'm going to send these 3 emails and then do this thing and then do this. And that's a problem, right? I need to stop thinking about those things. I just enjoy the walk as it is. So what that looks like for me is like focusing on like the scents or the smells or just the feelings of my feet touching the ground, being mindful when I'm walking, right? Which turns out to be really hard because every 20 seconds my brain naturally goes back to, okay, what do you need to do when you get back? Again, that goes back to what I brought up earlier about this like hyper-productive late stage capitalism society. We're always working about working and worried about the next thing and the next thing and not being in the present. So yeah, forcing yourself to step outside of that mindset and really taking a pause on the things that happen. Right. My therapist will say, go stare at a wall. Literally go stare at a wall for half an hour a day. That will help you. You shouldn't be thinking so much. Just go stare at a white wall and just notice. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Right. Don't have to think about your calendar or your to-do list or anything like that, which is hard because we all have so much going on and you don't want to do that. Right. It's like, why would I waste half an hour staring at a wall when I could be emailing or reading a book about whatever that will train me to do the next thing better. But I think it's important, right? Like if you're not mindful, you're not spending time for your mind, then you can't use your mind to do other things that you want to do because you're always exhausted, you're always falling behind. So taking that time out during the day is important.
Yeah, I'm big on meditation and mindfulness. I think it's really important, as you've mentioned. In addition to that, I think one of the biggest things that's helped me has been wrestling, surprisingly, right? And I think most people want to look at some like difficult sport as somehow helping them with their mental health. But I think definitely one like the whenever work gets hard, like winter term, like that's the thing I look forward to all day because I guess I've come to realize that when you're wrestling, it's difficult, right? Whether you're sprinting in practice, you're doing something difficult, but it forces you for an hour and a half to focus on something in the present moment, which is like when you're meditating, you can try to focus on your breath, but your mind will start to wander. But some activity, I think I've heard people call it a flow state activity that can just ground you in the present moment that I guess people like athletes will call like they're in the zone or they're locked in. It's basically like you're so absorbed in the present moment by the task that it's like your brain turns off. And I think that's such a beautiful thing I found that even like in the future, if even if I'm not pursuing wrestling as a sport or getting better at it, even just one wrestling practice a week is good for mental health, which I don't think I've heard a lot of people talk about that, pursuing some of these difficult, hard things is also just good for your mental state on a day-to-day basis. So
Yeah, right. That brings a couple more things for me. I do boxing. I go to a boxing gym in the area, and that helps, right? Like an hour every other day, I go and I hit the heavy bag for an hour with a coach. And that's great, right? Like I don't think about anything. My brain doesn't have the capacity to think about work when I'm like literally sweating and just ready to pass out, or literally because I'm working so hard. And that's great, right? It's therapeutic in a way. If I really wanted to, it's almost like anger management. Like it's helpful, right? I can think about all the work and all the things I can worry about and just punch it out. Literally, right? And that's what my coach says. You're not here because you want to have a good time. You're here because you want to like be better and you want to like let all that tension out. Also I started doing a lot of baking. I do sourdough bread baking, which turns out to be surprisingly soothing and therapeutic, right? Because like on the second I do a 3-day recipe, like it's not easy, right? It takes forever. And on a second day, you have to spend 4 hours with the dough that you made on the first day to like fold it and rise it and like observe it and fold it more. So it's a lot of like you're literally just in the kitchen nonstop kneading the dough and folding the dough and watching it rise. And there's this magical sense of like watching something, right? Like literally grains of wheat that we harvested from the earth to like grow into this loaf of bread that you eat on the next day. That's really like comforting, right? And you're in the moment, you're just coexisting with this blob of bread dough, and somehow, right, you're in the zone. Literally, I was in the zone and I would just fold the bread for 4 hours. And next thing you know, you're ready to bake. And then you get food, you get delicious food after. So, yeah, whatever works to help you get in the zone, I think that's very important.
you mentioned a couple of times that you've met with a therapist, and I'm curious, what are some of the earliest factors or motivators that drove you to get a therapist? Because it's something that I've been interested in recently. And the reason is because I always thought there was a stigma around therapy as like something that you do if like you're like severely depressed and if you're doing therapy, like something's wrong with you. But I think I've recently learned that it's a very common thing to do just because it's kind of like journaling on steroids. Like it's literally just like you're telling someone your problems so you can understand them better. So in what ways has it helped you in your life? And what were some of the early motivating factors that led you to do that?
Yeah, my philosophy is always that everybody could benefit from therapy, right? And I think everybody should go to therapy. Um, I wanted to get a therapist since I was in college, right? I think it's always important to talk about things, right? For me, I think it's about I was in a hard STEM field for most of my days in college, physics and math and philosophy, and people there refuse to talk about how they're doing, how they're feeling. And I always had these feelings and I had nowhere to let them out, right? And I was like, oh, I really want to talk to someone about how I'm doing today because there's so much on my mind that I want to just let it out. And I had nowhere to really let it out besides like going on a walk and talking to my dog, which doesn't really help, right? So when I got a job, when I got out of college, I went to grad school and then, lived on my own, got a job, it became, oh, okay, I can actually hire someone, sometimes free of charge based on your insurance. They will listen to me and give me feedback and talk back to me about how I'm doing. And that's really important and helpful, right? And I think therapy has helped me highlight issues that I don't even see in my life, right? Like recently I was like, I'm always tired. I'm always like catching up to the tasks that I have to do. Like I'm not doing enough. I don't think, right? Like I'm working so hard and I'm always tired. My therapist was like, how many hours are you sleeping a night? And I was like, well, I went to bed at 1:30 and got up at 6. And she was like, yeah, that's probably why you're not sleeping enough, right? And that was I never thought about that. And I was like, well, that's natural. I was doing work and I was being productive. And it's this conversation we had about sleeping is productive too, right? You need to rest your mind and your body before you can go on to conquer the next day. If you're always working, that's not productive anymore because your work is going to be lower quality because your brain is barely awake, right? We've all been there. We study all night and you take a test the next day and you do horribly because your brain is exhausted. So yeah, that's a lesson I learned recently. Sleeping is productive. You need to rest before you can go on and do more, right? These are things that therapy can help you figure out and highlight that you may not realize, right? I was like, oh, I really want to talk about how I can be more productive. And the answer was like sleep, which I don't think I can ever reason myself into by just thinking on my own, right? So having this other person who's trained and knows like these things helps.
I think one of the other benefits I've heard about therapy is that I always thought that it's like you make a list of problems, you go to your therapist, say, "This is the problem I have," and she gives you the solution, you go home. I thought that was like what I encapsulated in my mind. But I think when I realized more of it, it's not really that. And I was reading this book by Jordan Peterson that really got me thinking about this, that he was talking about how just talking, just saying things out loud is one of the most therapeutic things you can do. Because what a therapist does is they don't give you solutions to your problems. They just reflect their own thoughts back at you, right? Like they'll hear you talk for 30 minutes and then they'll ask you a question that just gets you to think more. And it's like basically you're digging inside yourself with the help of someone else who's simply just like there as a mirror, just like holding a mirror up and helping you to reflect your own thoughts back at you. If you enjoyed that clip, then you're gonna love the full length podcast. Click here to watch the entire length podcast, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.